Welcome to a deep dive into some really interesting, maybe slightly unsettling findings bubbling up from the world of digital security and privacy.
Yeah, we've been digging into a source that really focuses on threats and vulnerabilities.
And our mission today is simple. Pull out the key knowledge nuggets it highlighted just for you. Make sense of what's shifting.
That's right. The digital landscape, well, never sits still, does it? This source gave us a snapshot of some key changes, some challenges you might not otherwise hear about.
Things happening under the hood.
Exactly. It's about understanding those subtle but pretty significant shifts.
And this source brought up some genuinely surprising things. We're going to look at what it revealed about, well, unexpected changes to who the internet even trusts for website security. Then we'll dive into a seriously clever hack, quite ingenious, really, that could have exposed Google account phone numbers.
Scary stuff.
And finally, unpack a potentially worrying new technique, something called local mass, that some apps might be using to track Android users in a way that kind of sidesteps the usual privacy tools.
It is a lot, but each piece offers a valuable insight into the constant evolution of online safety and privacy.
Okay, let's jump right in. First topic from the source. Changes to who major browsers, specifically Google Chrome, trusts for website security. What's the core issue here?
So, when you visit a website and you see HTTPS, that S means it's supposed to be secure, encrypted.
Right, the padlock icon.
Yeah, exactly. That security relies on digital certificates. And these certificates are issued by organizations called certification authorities, or CAs.
Okay, CAs, like digital notaries.
That's a great way to put it. They verify a website as who it claims to be, so your browser can trust it and set up that secure connection. Your browser, like Chrome, it keeps a list of CAs it trusts.
Okay, so for a CA to actually lose that trust from a huge browser like Chrome, they must have really messed up somewhere. That sounds like a big deal.
Oh, it is. It's a big deal in the web's whole trust infrastructure. And this source, it highlighted Google's recent announcement came out May 30th, 2025, that Chrome would stop trusting certificates issued by two specific CAs, Changhua Telecom and NetLock.
Changhua Telecom and NetLock, okay.
Yeah.
And why? What were Google's reasons? Seems pretty drastic for a trusted authority.
Well, the language Google used, as quoted in the source, was quite strong. They said these CAs had, quote, failed expectations.
Failed expectations. Ouch.
Yeah, and showed patterns representing a loss of integrity over the past several months and years. They pointed to things like compliance failures, unmet improvement commitments, and just a general absence of tangible, measurable progress after previous issues.
So basically they weren't fixing problems.
Right. And Google concluded that, considering all these failures together and the, quote, inherent risk CAs pose if they aren't reliable,
Right.
well, continued public trust is no longer justified.
Wow. Loss of integrity. Inherent risk. That really hits home how seriously Google takes this. Okay, so for me, just browsing the web, what's the actual impact? What happens if I hit a site using a cert from one of these, now untrusted CAs?
Right. So the source explains the consequence. For any website using certificates from Changhua Telecom or NetLock issued after July 31st, 2025, Google Chrome will show a big warning screen.
A warning screen.
Yeah, they call it a page interstitial. Basically, it stops you before you get to the site, tells you the connection isn't considered secure or trustworthy anymore.
Got it. So even the foundation of web trust isn't static. Browsers are actively, policing this and cutting off CAs that don't measure up.
Precisely. It's constantly being managed.
That's a key insight. Okay, so where does the source take us next? Away from CAs.
Well, yeah, speaking of unexpected holes in big systems, the source then details this really clever attack chain found by a security researcher. It could have potentially exposed Google account phone numbers.
Wait, hang on. My Google account phone number, that's incredibly sensitive information. Who found this, and what was the basic idea? How'd they do it?
So the researcher goes by the name BruteCat. And the source describes how BruteCat found this attack chain targeting Google's username recovery endpoint.
Username recovery.
Okay, yeah, it's typically a less common function, maybe for older browsers or situations without JavaScript.
Okay, but how did they actually find out if an account exists and, get masked phone numbers? Just starting with what, an email or a name?
It involved chaining together two specific endpoints. BruteCat found that if you use these two endpoints together in tandem, you could confirm if a Google account existed for a given phone number and maybe an account name.
Okay.
And critically, the source notes BruteCat was able to pull masked phone numbers, where some digits are hidden.
Right.
And importantly, get these values to bypass the bot card tokens from rate limiting the calls.
Bot guard tokens. Those are the things that stop bots from hammering a service, right? The QPCCH-like things.
Sort of, yeah. Automated security checks to prevent rapid-fire requests. BruteCat found a way around them for this specific process.
That's already pretty smart, getting past those bot checks. But didn't the source also say Google had already stopped showing account names from these kinds of endpoints if you weren't logged in?
Yes, exactly.
So how did BruteCat see the account name if Google had supposedly locked that down already?
This is the really ingenious part the source highlighted. Even though the main recovery points were tightened up, BruteCat found a workaround
How?
by sharing a document via Looker Studio.
Looker Studio, isn't that Google's own data visualization tool?
That's the one. The vulnerability was apparently in how Looker Studio handled user info, specifically when sharing. By trying to share a document, BruteCat found they could get the recipient's account name to pop up briefly as part of that sharing process.
Whoa. So it was a side channel. A loophole in a totally different Google product used to feed info back into the first attack.
You got it. It was exploiting the standard endpoint checks, plus this Looker Studio trick to get the account name that wasn't supposed to be visible.
Wow.
And by combining those pieces, the source says BruteCat created a series of scripts that allowed them to brute force phone numbers from Google accounts.
Brute force? How fast are we talking?
The source included BruteCat's estimate.
Yeah.
It could take only 20 minutes to brute force the phone number for an account that utilized a U.S.-based area code.
20 minutes for a U.S. number. That's incredibly fast. You could cycle through possibilities really quickly.
Disturbingly fast, yeah.
Did the source give, like, a real-world proof of concept?
It did. It mentioned the security journalists at 404 Media. Apparently, BruteCat demonstrated the vulnerability by being able to pull a phone number just by knowing a given email address for someone on their team.
Okay, that makes it very real.
But,
So when was this reported to Google, and what did they do?
Disclosure was in early April 2024. BruteCat got a bug bounty, initially something called $8.
$8.
Yeah, the source notes it was eventually elevated to $5K USD.
Ah, okay. $5,000.
Right, and Google confirmed to the source that the specific Node.js recovery form, which was part of this chain, had been deprecated, basically shut down by June 6th.
So found, reported, fixed pretty quickly. It really shows how valuable these researchers are, finding things in unexpected corners like Looker Studio.
Absolute creative thinking.
Okay, so we've covered foundational trust with CAs and a specific account vulnerability. Now, this third finding from the source, it sounds like a whole new kind of tracking challenge.
Yeah, this next one is particularly concerning because it describes a technique that seems to operate outside the usual boundaries we think about for web tracking. The source highlights what it calls a novel way to track Android users, reportedly used by Meta and Yandex, and the technique is called local mass.
Local mass. Okay, what is that, and why is it novel and, well, worrying?
And so the source defines local mass as a system that utilizes local host to connect browsers to users. Local host just means your own device, basically.
Right, 127.0.1.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's a way for different things on your phone, like a browser and an app, to talk directly to each other, potentially bypassing the normal internet route or even browser isolation.
Okay.
And the source explicitly says that disdain for information tracking is getting worse among security folks, specifically because of this finding. It's raised some eyebrows.
Utilizes local hosts to connect browsers to users. Okay, break that down. How does it actually work? How did Meta reportedly implement this, according to the source?
Okay, the source details the steps. It starts when you first open the native Facebook or Instagram app on your Android phone.
Just opening the app?
Yeah. The app starts listening to UDP and TCP ports locally. Think of these like internal digital doorways on your phone that software can use to communicate.
Listening.
Yeah.
Okay, then what?
The crucial next step happens later. The next time you visit any website in a browser on that same phone that has the metapixel embedded.
Which is on millions of websites.
Millions. That pixel doesn't just send data back to Facebook over the internet like usual. It also tries to send cookie info to those native apps, Facebook or Instagram, via WebRTC STP munching.
Whoa, okay. WebRTC STP munching, that sounds technical. Can you simplify that? What's the point of the munching?
Right, so the source mentions STP munching specifically because it's a method for packaging and sending data that's designed to be, well, stealthy, hard to detect.
Obfuscated.
Exactly. It wraps the data up so it doesn't look like typical tracking traffic to standard monitoring tools like the developer tools built into Chrome. The source points out that because it uses this method, the data flow was not able to be observed using regular debugging tools.
Ah, okay. So it helps the tracking happen without being easily spotted. The Pixel talks to the app locally using this hidden channel.
That's the idea. The Pixel sends the cookie info from your browser session over to the Facebook or Instagram app that's listening locally on your device, using this obfuscated STP munching. Well, the source also notes the Pixel still sends requests to a Facebook endpoint with browser history info over the regular internet. But then, the actual native app on your phone takes the cookie info it received locally via this local mask technique, and it transmits that data to another Facebook endpoint.
Okay, so the app sends the cookie data it got locally.
Yes, effectively linking the cookie, and therefore your browsing activity on potentially unrelated websites to the Instagram or Facebook account that's logged into the app on your phone.
So it's bridging your web browsing via the Pixel with your app identity via that local connection, even if you're just browsing random sites, not even on Facebook.com.
That seems to be the mechanism described, yes. The localhost connection acts as the bridge, bypassing some of the usual web security separations between browser and apps.
And the source said Yandex uses something similar.
Yeah, the source stated the Yandex implementation is very similar, just using their Yandex Metrica scripts instead of the Metapixel. Same principle, different companies' tools.
When did the source say this started happening?
According to the source's research, Yandex might have started using this method, including the obfuscation, as early as 2017.
2017, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Meta apparently started more recently, maybe late 2024.
What makes this so concerning from a privacy angle? We know about cookies and pixels, but this feels different.
Well, the biggest concern the source highlights is that this technique exploits unrestricted access to local host sockets on the Android platforms. It leverages the fact that apps and browsers on the same device can often talk locally without needing specific user permission for that kind of communication.
And it happens silently.
That's the other crucial point the source emphasizes. It happens without any user awareness. No notification, no opt-in for this specific local data handoff. It's background activity.
Okay, that's worrying. And does it get around the usual privacy tools we might use, like incognito mode or clearing cookies?
That's another major flag raised by the source. It explicitly states that current privacy controls, things like sandboxing, mobile platform permissions, browser permissions, web consent pop-ups, incognito modes, even resetting your mobile advertising ID or clearing cookies, are insufficient to control and mitigate it.
Insufficient. So it bypasses all that.
It seems designed to operate around those layers, using that local device communication channel, instead of channels those controls typically monitor or restrict.
That is really significant. If the tools many of us rely on don't work against this, how widespread could this be? How many sites have these pixels or scripts?
The source gave some numbers to illustrate the potential scale. Over 5.8 million websites with the Metapixel embedded.
5.8 million.
And almost 3 million websites with the Yandex Metrica script embedded.
Okay.
So based on that sheer number, the source's conclusion was pretty blunt. The chances of you as an Android user not hitting one of these sites is really low. You're almost certain to encounter them.
Wow. The source even threw in a bit of speculation connecting this to a common feeling people have, right?
It did, yeah.
Yeah.
It was an interesting aside. The source wondered aloud, basically, if this is why it was always felt like Facebook was always listening. You know, that feeling people describe.
Yeah, talking about something, then seeing an ad for it.
Right. The source speculated if maybe this mechanism, linking browsing data back via the app, even when you weren't actively using Meta apps, could contribute to that feeling. It framed it as speculation, but linked it directly to this finding.
Okay, so let's pull these three threads together from the source.
Here.
We've got the shifting ground of basic web trust with CAs being delisted. We've got this really clever multi-stage vulnerability found in Google accounts using an unexpected loophole in Looker Studio.
Right.
And then this novel local mass tracking on Android that seems to bypass a whole suite of standard privacy tools by communicating locally.
Yeah, they really paint a picture of a digital security and privacy landscape that's just constantly churning, often in ways completely invisible to us as users.
Trust isn't static. Vulnerabilities pop up in weird places.
And tracking gets more sophisticated, harder to spot, harder to block. Understanding these underlying mechanics, how CAs work, how exploits get chained, how local host comms can be, well, abused, it's becoming pretty essential.
It really underscores how knowing the details, even the technical ones, matters more and more for navigating online safely.
Absolutely does.
Okay, so we've done our deep dive into the source material, pulling out these key points. The CA trust changes, the brute cat Google vulnerability, and this local mass tracking method. Hopefully, this gives you a much clearer picture of some pretty complex issues highlighted in the source.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to chew on there when you think about online safety and just how your data gets handled, often without you realizing it.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, reflecting on everything in the source, what's one lingering thought or maybe a question you'd encourage our listener to ponder?
Okay. Well, considering how that local mass technique, as the source detailed it, seems engineered to specifically bypass so many standard privacy controls we rely on, sandboxing, permissions, consent, incognito, cookie clearing, all of it.
Right.
What does that finding really tell us about the ongoing challenge of creating genuinely effective digital privacy measures, especially in such a complex ecosystem? And maybe more pointedly, who's ultimately responsible for building and enforcing those measures when techniques like this come to light? Is it the OS makers, the app developers, regulators, us?
That's a really powerful question to leave people with. Who owns privacy when the rules keep getting bypassed? Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
We hope it was insightful for you.